Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the Group of Five Deep Dive. College football is back. This is not a drill. We have games to discuss. We are less than 100 hours away from the kickoff to the 2025 season. I'm Mike Calabrese. I'm joined by my BBOC co-host Duck to break down everything that Week 0 has to offer in the G5 lands. And a quick formatting note for our season upcoming, how this is all going to break down in the fall. Each week, we're going to try to deliver as many winners as possible to you, dear listener. But things are going to go a little bit differently in terms of our packaging. We are doubling our best bets from 2 to 4, so you're going to get 2 from each of us. We're also going to introduce a pair of new segments, our 2-minute drills and our 4-minute offense. Our 2-minute drills are going to be timed, going to give an opportunity for us to lay out the rest of our cards. We're also going to have a timeout in our back pocket to expand that 2-minute drill by 30 seconds. But both of us, we're just going to machine gun through the bottom of our card to be able to maximize the amount of picks that we're giving you. We're also going to have an opportunity to go through what we're calling the 4-minute offense. We read the feedback, we get the emails, we hear from our producers in our production meetings. People always want a spotlight on the G5 game of the week. I couldn't agree more. We're going to be able to have a little bit of space to be able to explore every single angle, the historical angles, the weather, the coaching, be able to deep dive some of these games, even if neither one of us has an official play, if it's just leans only, or if it's just to give a spotlight to a game that deserves it. That's what we're going to do. We're also going to be debuting a new opening segment at the beginning of next week with our Week 1 preview, where we're going to just sound off. You guys have the Bad Beats hotline. This is our opportunity to rip the coaches, the refs, the players, everyone that screwed us out of being able to cash at the window. And also there's going to be some positive sound offs, the guys who are our G5 heroes who are coming in strong, but just exploring the space there, expanding the scope of what we can talk about at the top. We know this isn't a recap show, but we want to make sure that we're not missing anything that's truly monumental in the G5 gambling space. In terms of timing, last note here, we'll be able to release this G5 deep dive earlier this week, but for Week 1, we're going to start moving into that regular cadence of first thing Wednesday morning, the episode dropping. So when you're updating your podcast feed and you're looking for the BBOC and specifically the Group of 5 deep dive, they're going to come in on Wednesday mornings. All right. All of that table setting set aside, it's time to talk best bets. Week 0, Duck, fire away with your first play.
Yep, so right away, went into Idaho State versus UNLV over 62.5. I played this game this morning, Monday morning. I'd play it all the way up to 65.5. Dan Mullen is going to bring in a highly sophisticated offensive system. We will likely see him use the quarterback in the run game with Calandria and Alex Orji, in addition to Jaden Thomas, who popped off last season for 918 yards and 6 yards a carry on the ground. I fully expect UNLV to be humming on the ground in this week. 300 rushing yards would not surprise me. Idaho State was 121st nationally in FCS last season, surrendering 253 yards per game on the ground and 5.2 yards per carry. And all 5 of their defensive linemen are gone from last season's bunch. So they're going through a full rebuild on the defensive line. Just really going to be a struggle for Idaho State. UNLV also really needs to kind of run their stuff deep into the second half here, as I think they need to see what they have at receiver, and they need to generate some continuity in the passing game with both quarterbacks before they hit the road and then see UCLA come in. So there's definitely some motivation to kind of get those meaningful reps late in the second half, even in a game that might have a wide margin. Idaho State secondary last season, 63% completion percentage surrendered with a 19-3 touchdown to interception ratio, and they only return 1 starter in that defensive secondary. It is going to be atrocious for Idaho State defensively yet again. Another interesting caveat for UNLV that I think is really critical for them to focus on: they were just awful in the red zone last season, and it was a problem that did not go away all year. 71 red zone opportunities for UNLV. Well, in 35 of those opportunities, they either returned away with 0 points or they were kicking field goals. They settled for 21 red zone field goals and had 14 empty possessions last year in the red zone. It was just so sloppy with the red zone execution and directly cost them some games last season. So I think even though it's a different regime and some different players, that has to be a focus here for this bunch this season, is executing with high efficiency in the red zone, which, if they do it well, will increase the scoring. Now, with Idaho State, there's actually a couple things here to like offensively for the Bengals this season. Jordan Cook returns at quarterback, and he was pretty dynamic in 2023. Threw for 2,200 yards and 22 touchdowns. He was hurt last season after the opener, but he returns. They're going to throw the ball at a 2-to-1 ratio, and truly, I expect Idaho State to really abandon the run game early, as they're not going to have success on the ground here against UNLV's defense. 4 of the 6 top receivers are back for Idaho State, and they have receiver transfers from Baylor, UTEP, and Utah State that'll add some explosivity here. UNLV and what they want to do defensively in the Paul Gunther system is they want to create pressure, but they're going to do that via the blitz. And that's going to be feast or famine for the Rebs. That could allow them some being susceptible to give up the big play, or they might create some turnovers with that. So you could get some cheap scores there, or they could give up some explosives. And Idaho State's going to throw it around till the end. So I think you're going to have motivation for UNLV to figure out some things that they really need to work on offensively to figure out what they have deep into the second half. Idaho State's defense is atrocious. Their offense is going to be throwing it around. I think we're going to see points aplenty in this game. So go on the high side, 65.5.
Now, a situation where you have multiple quarterbacks, you have Calandra, you have Orgy, do you actually think that plays in your favor game flow wise? Because in a standard situation where you have the established QB1 and the backup just running the vanilla offensive package, in a spot like this, you're probably going to want to have the entirety of the playbook available to both quarterbacks. And what's interesting, I'll actually reel that back a little bit. I feel like Orgy is going to have more of those run packages, those design runs that Mullen had great success with quarterbacks going all the way back to Alex Smith, whereas Calandra is going to be running the full offense. And also just being game one of a new regime, that you can't have enough points on the board, you can't put up enough yardage, you can't have enough excitement. So do you think that actually plays towards UNLV laying it all on the line for 60 minutes as opposed to reeling back and saving some, to not put it on film, or to say, listen, backup quarterback, reserves, let's just run the clock out here and get to next week?
Totally agree. Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. I think we'll see UNLV maybe salt away the last 4 minutes, but they won't start that vanilla offense procedure early in the fourth quarter of a wide margin, like many teams might. So you definitely have some motivation here to keep running your stuff, to get some meaningful reps for both quarterbacks, and to develop continuity with this receiver group, which I think will be really critically important as UNLV gets into the meat and potatoes of their schedule. Definitely agree with that.
Time for my first best bet of the 2025 season, going over in Sam Houston against Western Kentucky. It's been popping around the low 60s. I'd play it up to 64.5. And we talked a lot about coaching changes, scheme changes, the whiplash element that some of these teams at the G5 level have experienced. Well, let's talk about just how crazy that's going to be for Sam Houston. Casey Keeler, a beloved coach, the most important coach in program history, wins him an FCS national title, shepherds them through the transition to the FBS. They end up with 10 wins last season, but it was all built around a ball control offense and a salty defense. If you look at what they were able to accomplish last season, they were 22nd nationally in average time of possession, 10th in run percentage, and the defense was top 25 in so many key metrics: yards allowed, red zone scoring, takeaways. So when you put it all together, it didn't surprise anyone that with all of that being available to them, they just need to quarterback play, and they got enough of it. Now, all of a sudden, Casey Keeler's off to Temple. Cassidy, their defensive coordinator, who was an incredible defensive coordinator, has been poached by in-state North Texas. And the replacements, we'll see if they're successful. But for one thing, I know it's just going to be a different brand of football. Phil Longo and his dairy raid in Madison, Wisconsin was a flop for 2 years. But he comes in here, he's going to immediately up the tempo. They're going to potentially put Hunter Watson in a position to be more successful statistically. He's someone who is a great dual threat. And by the way, this Western Kentucky defense lost its top 12 tacklers. On the other side of it, Freddie Autry-Lindsey is the new DC. As I mentioned, the drop-off from Cassidy to him, this is a guy who's never been a full-time defensive coordinator as a play caller. He has, a few instances where he was an interim DC, but other than that, he's been a defensive backs coach. He was at NC State. This is a big move up against a Western Kentucky offense that basically is playing the hits again. Helton had that great success 4 years ago, going down to the FCS ranks, pulling everybody out of that historically good Houston Baptist offense, brings Kitley, the OC, brings Zappy, brings his number one target. Zappy sets the FBS record for yardage and passing touchdowns in the season. And since then, he's been looking to rekindle that magic. So he's just going back to it. Gets Rick Bowie and his quarterback, Maverick McIver, for Abilene Christian. They finally punch a ticket to the FCS playoffs for the first time in school history. They ran an IndyCar tempo. They went over 1,000 plays that they ran on offense. And because of that, that left their defense on the field a lot. They were one of the few teams at the FCS level that didn't go super deep in the playoffs to face 1,000 offensive snaps on the other side of things. So when I look at this, I look at a Western Kentucky defense that could be gassed. And by the way, they couldn't stop the run at all last season. They were one of the few teams in the last 5 years of college football that gave up over 3,000 rushing yards. This is a real bad recipe if you're looking for stops at any point. And as I mentioned, Hunter Watson is a dual threat running quarterback. I think there's going to be opportunities for Longo to dial up some design runs and just run through this Hilltopper defense like absolute tissue paper. The only other thing that I see in this is I just think the public and sports books are slow to adjust. All the metrics for Sam Houston last year are basically throwing this off. I saw on Twitter, if you just punched in the numbers for their metrics, their tempo, their pace, this total should be closer to 50. Obviously, that's not the case. I honestly would probably play this up to 67.5. I think that's how far off this is by a full touchdown. Maverick McIver is going to cook in this game. Katie Hutchinson throwing into a Sam Houston defense that they just have so many green players there. They have so little continuity. They also have a defensive coordinator that needs to get his sea legs. This, to me, is screaming shootout. So I'm going to go over, at this point, I believe it's 61.5 out in the market. Do you agree with that one? I know Colin Wilson from the BBOC universe is already all over this one. This is why it's my best bet. What do you say about this total?
Yep, we're all on the same page here. I've already got this play logged in the Action Network app. A complete DNA change for Sam Houston State. They really hung their hat on slow ball control pace offensively during their first couple of seasons at FBS, and they really hung their hat on a stingy defense, which it's just not going to be the case this season for Sam Houston. They couldn't even field a legitimate 2 deep in the spring because of all the roster turnover and all of the departures. And with what they backfilled with, the talent level defensively and the guy scheming it up is just not there. Now, I think offensively, we will see the air raid system. We'll see some tempo from Sam Houston, which is, again, a 180 from what they ran last season. And I still think we'll see them attempt to run the ball a little more, which, as you alluded to, is something that Western Kentucky did not do well at stopping last year. They were terrible stopping the run. 236 yards per game on the ground. It was just not very good in the run defense department. The thing that we may see as well is you could see some 3-and-outs a lot with Sam Houston offensively, and that's going to expose an already descending defense. Western Kentucky might have the ball a ton, and they might have some favorable field position, so it might not be those long marathon drives that we'll need to set up scores. They might get the ball at midfield several times and be set up for quick strikes. They've got some great receivers that have come in via the portal. Matthew Henry comes in from Western Illinois, and then they've got a pair of receivers that were at Charlotte who come in. So there's a lot of pass receivers for Western Kentucky, a lot of options for Maverick to sling it around. And Sam Houston, they're going to run their stuff too. They're not going to quit and probably have some success against that Western Kentucky defense. I just, like you had said, I just don't think that the books have accounted for the style of play change for Sam Houston. Western Kentucky gets the bump at quarterback. They've got plenty of options to sling it around. All systems go here on the over.
Same thing happened in 2021. Books were slow to adjust. 10-4 to the overs in Western Kentucky games with Zappe at the helm. We'll see if they can be an ATM in terms of the overs again here this fall. The 4-minute offense. This is where we're going to get into the G5 spotlight game, talk a little bit of historical angles, talk about some coaching before we get into our plays, which the synergy is perfect this week because our best bets, number 2 for each of us, touch on Stanford, Hawaii out on the islands. If you listen to Colin and Stuck break down the trees in the ACC preview, this is a bad situation for the Cardinal. There's a chance, according to Stuckey, you look at some other projections out there in the market, that they could be an underdog in every single game this season. So yes, they are a P4 team. Yes, they're traveling out there. This is an opportunity for Hawaii, but they are no heavyweight by any stretch. They had a highly touted quarterback in Elijah Brown. He didn't even win the starting job. The defense lost their only true superstar to David Bailey to the Texas Tech Matador Club. They end up opening their coffers, paying him a bundle to come help their pass rush. He was the only one that was ascending from a defensive perspective. And now you have this road trip to Hawaii, who is in a rare home favorite spot, at least under Timmy Chang. Since he's arrived at Hawaii, he's a perfect 6-0 straight up as a home favorite. and 4-1-1 against the closing number. Playing in Ching Athletic Complex, you're going to get a sellout or close to it. It's a very small place. It's a bandbox. It's like 16,000. I think the atmosphere is going to be pretty electric for this when you consider Micah Alejado is set to take the field as their QB1. He's a program savior. He's someone who was born on the island. This just has a different energy based on where they were last year. Stanford, by the way, if you want to talk home and away splits and what they've done, 3-9 for the fourth straight season in 2024. And as a road underdog in this stretch, this awful 4-year stretch where they're only winning 3 games a season, against the spread, 6-13-1. Those are the most against the spread losses as a road underdog of any team in America in that stretch. So they keep getting in this spot. They keep underperforming. They keep rolling over, and opposing teams are cashing tickets at the window. But this wouldn't be a Hawaii game without a weather report, and this one is incredibly meaningful. Give us your best Jim Cantore impersonation, Duck. What is the weather going to be out in the South Pacific?
Well, the current projections are going to be wind, and it's going to be a sustained wind of 18 to 22 with gusts up to 26 or 27. So I think that that's just something to keep an eye on. We're still a little ways out from nailing down the exact wind speeds, but there's going to be wind on the island. There's a consistent wind this time of year, and we'll see it affect this game in some capacity with them having to battle through windy conditions at Hawaii this upcoming Saturday. I think it's really fascinating, too, to just think about this. I'm not quite ready to crown Alejado as the next Cole McDonald or Bryant Moniz or even Braden Shager here with the Hawaii offense, although they really did let him rip it against New Mexico in that season finale. I think it was a little bit of a different situation because their season was already over. They weren't playing for a bowl game. Shager was hurt, and so yeah, let's let the local kid rip it and see what he's got. This, I think, has to be considered a must-win for Hawaii, as they have got to get all the wins that they possibly can in order to put themselves in position to make a bowl game this season, and I think Timmy Chang knows that. So I think that they'll certainly do their fair share of passing, but even last year in the air raid system, we didn't see as much tempo. We saw them operate methodically, and they did try to run the ball a little bit more. And I think Timmy Chang knows that they are successful as a team when they have success running the ball, which I think they'll be able to do against Stanford in this game. So, we perceive Hawaii to be this pass-happy bunch that throws it around. And, that's kind of what we saw way back to the Colt Brennan days. But I just don't know if we're going to see him sling it around 50 times in this game. I think we'll see our fair share of passing, but I think Hawaii will actually try to run the ball a little bit more than expected in this week 0 opener. And with Stanford, they're going to more of a pro-style attack. We've got Frank Reich and Nate Bynum that both have their fingerprint on the offensive system. They're going to use some tight ends. The pass game is going to be predominantly shorter routes to the tight ends. And with guys like Alec Iomanner and Mosley that are gone on the outside, and you bring in Ben Gulbranson, who's not really a guy that feasts downfield with explosivity, I just don't see a ton of the chunk plays for Stanford. We've got an offensive line that was kind of piecemealed together and doesn't necessarily grade out okay. So we'll really see what they've got along the offensive line. One thing that I think is significantly underrated in this matchup is the Hawaii defense. They return a tremendous amount of production on defense. At times, they performed really well against the run. And the secondary, they were a little susceptible to explosivity, but the secondary played really well, and they get a shot in the arm with Virgil Edwards returning alongside Peter Manuma in the secondary. So I think that Hawaii has the upper hand on the Stanford offense. I don't think we're going to get a tremendous amount of pace here. Everything just seems to be pointing to being difficult for Stanford when they have the ball against this Hawaii offense. You already have the travel. You're breaking in new players at all the levels of offense in every room. You've got a quarterback that doesn't really gain a tremendous amount of explosives. The running back room, they need to figure out what they have. The outside weapons on the outside are gone. It just seems like a struggle. And when Stanford does get into the red zone, if they do, Hawaii actually was sneaky good in red zone defense last season. 44 red zone attempts against them, only 25 touchdowns allowed, and they held opponents to 13 red zone field goals. So even if Stanford does get down there, they have a field goal operation that they trust, and I can just kind of see this one being conservative play calling. Let's take the 3 points. So my second best bet, which coincides with our deep dive here of this Stanford-Hawaii game, is I took Stanford team total under 26.5. I think it's going to be a struggle for Stanford all game to really get in a rhythm offensively, and I just think that they're really underskilled, even more than they're leading on. I don't think this team is very talented offensively, and Hawaii has a significant upper hand with what they bring back on defense.
I'm going to stick with this side for my best bet. I like the Bows laying 2.5. And what I feel as though I'm getting walking into this week 0 matchup, a motivated, healthy, experienced Warrior team with juice. Alejado brings the juice. I went back and I watched the entire game against New Mexico. He can make all of the throws in this offense. I understand that New Mexico's defense was buns. That's fine. There's still, whether you're throwing even against air, can you layer these passes in? I've just done the entire baseball season with Sean Zerillo, and he always talks about pitch mix. When it comes to quarterbacks, is everything a bullet? Can you layer it in there? Can you throw with anticipation? Alejado absolutely can. And this offense is also a quarterback's best friend, even in a windy situation, because they can play pickleball if they want to. They can shrink down the area that they're attacking on the field because they attack all the way across. So you got some, pre-snap reads that you see. He's not reading the defense as soon as the ball snapped. He's read it before they've even snapped the ball. So it's out of his hands immediately. They put in the RPOs, those read option plays for him. And also, when you talk about the run game, you have to mention him as well, because Timmy Chang, in terms of being a play caller, seventh highest percentage, I should say, of quarterback design runs of any play caller in the country in the last 5 years. So I think there's an opportunity to get Alejado healthy in this game, to go in and be dynamic. He went for over 50 rushing yards against New Mexico in that one start. And as I also said at the top with the Cardinal, with no David Bailey being a game plan wrecker, I think, you also have to turn your eyes to that secondary that is very green, and they're going to have to throw some extra manpower back there in terms of dropping zones just to be able to avoid those explosive plays. That means more time in the pocket for this kid to work and kind of pick them apart. When I'm saying that they're green, like Jordan Washington is going to start at one of their cornerback positions. He was at Dartmouth last year. I'm not saying the kid can't play. I'm just saying when you look at it up against this wide receiver core for Hawaii, that for my money, if they're all healthy and they're all playing at the absolute peak of their game, some of the best receivers in the G5 as a trio. When you look at Senecal, Ashlock, and then the Stanford transfer, Jackson Harris, who just got rave reviews the whole way. And I'm really glad that you talked about some of the issues and poking a hole in what Stanford brings to the table here, because they used to have that trademark toughness under David Shaw. Where was the toughness last year? They finished 116th in line yards. Now, Hawaii has 7 starters back on the defensive side, but they also went to the portal and got some big wins. I mentioned the Stanford wide receiver on offense. On defense, Luther McCoy comes in from Minnesota at defensive tackle. He's somebody that, at least, being healthy in game 1 for the Rainbow Warriors, is going to be someone who helps them in terms of their run defense. So are they going to get shoved around with a veteran linebacking core behind them as well? I don't think so. And Virgil Edwards, as you said, back in the secondary, he's somebody who could probably make the NFL if he can go ahead and stay healthy. I think the game plan is going to be simple against Gulbranson, which is stack the box, stop the run, say, hey, there's 20-mile-an-hour gusts. Good luck throwing 25 yards downfield against a veteran secondary as well. We're just going to put pressure on you and hope you make mistakes. I'm shocked that this hasn't cruised past the key number of 3. I would still play it up into the 4, 4.5, 5 range. I think this is going to be a coming out party for Alejado. I think this is the savior job season for Timmy Chang. All of their home games this year are winnable, including this one. I think they get off to a hot start. They make a statement. And Stanford, he's just keeping the seat warm. Frank Wright is not going to be the guy who's going to be the head coach in 2026. They're going to have a full-fledged job search. They're going to have the added advantage of being the first one to the trough and being able to vet all of these coaches throughout the season. That's all Andrew Luck and his staff are working on. So I think this is all looking over the horizon for Stanford, and I think Hawaii is going to take advantage here and go ahead and cash the win. Any other thoughts here on this game out on the islands?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the urgency is at an all-time high for Hawaii. They need to see the progress. They need to get to a bowl game for Timmy Chang. They've really supported him from an administration perspective. It's just now time to put the product on the field. And I think that they have the team to go out and get to bowl eligibility this year. And really, it starts and ends with home performances like this. They've been really disappointing in priors in these sort of situations, but I think this might be the year they get over the hump.
If you've been reading the room, you are now fully aware college football season is finally here. And to get the most out of the Action app, you're going to want to go ahead and get an Action Pro subscription. Only with Action Pro, you can get real-time pick alerts from me and the entire Action Network team of experts. Plus, you can access our pro projections powered by Sean Kerner and our predictive analytics team, plus a ton of other benefits. And if you don't want to commit to a full year, we've got great news for you. To celebrate college football's return, we have a special price for 1 week of Action Network Pro. Just go to actionnetwork.com/pro anytime during week 0 and get 1 week of Action Pro for just $9.99. No promo code needed. That's actionnetwork.com/pro to get 1 week of pro access for just $9.99 anytime during college football's week 0. We've now landed on our maiden voyage here of the 2-minute drill. You're going to run this hurry up offense, work the sidelines, make sure that you're not tackled in bounds before the 6. And we're going to give you one timeout. Be generous here in this spot, Duck. This is going to be your opportunity to always shoehorn in some of those FCS picks, which books hang stale numbers. Books aren't as interested because the volume isn't quite as high. Now, in a lot of cases, we're going to have to go on projections because these numbers won't pop in your legal sports book until probably Friday night, sometimes even Saturday mornings. But at this point, you have 3 plays that you want to get into. So I'm going to go ahead and put you on the clock. Let me know if you want to use that timeout. Let's get it started with your first 2-minute drill of the 2025 season.
Yeah, so for first play, Tarleton State travels to Portland State. Portland State replaces do-it-all quarterback Dante Sauchere, who passed for 1,970 yards last season and 723 rushing yards, and he really kept them competitive in some of their games last year. They now have a full rebuild along the offensive line, and they're breaking in a new quarterback with very minimal experience. The Portland State defense is absolutely a disaster. 519 yards per game surrendered last season on defense. They allowed 65% completion percentage with 29 passing touchdowns against, and 6.7 yards per carry surrendered on the ground during the entirety of the season. All bad for Portland State. Tarleton State returns quarterback Victor Gabalis, who's in year 3 of the system. They have a solid portal class that shored up the offensive line and receiver rooms, and they have 11 of their top 12 tacklers back on defense, including a real deep linebacker room. This line has projected at only Tarleton State -1, so anything under a touchdown is absolutely a play here for me on the Texans. Next one is the MEAC SWAC Challenge between North Carolina Central and Southern. North Carolina Central returns Walker Harris back at quarterback, who passed for 2,200 yards last season and 22 touchdowns. They have a loaded group of pass catchers that is far better than anything Southern will have seen last year in their slate. Defense loses a few key pieces, but they return experience at all 3 levels. Southern University had major quarterback issues last season and was not able to pass the ball at all. They had to rely on the ground game to keep them in it last year. North Carolina Central has better athletes, better coaching, and until Southern can show any ability to pass the ball with consistency, I'm going to fade them. Anything 9.5 or less is worth the play on North Carolina Central.
I'm going to go ahead and run in here as your assistant coach. Call timeout with 14 seconds left. Not pulling Asher O'Hara from Middle Tennessee during the pandemic season in which they didn't get a single playoff in the last 40 seconds of a first half. I will never forget that. Shout out to our producer, Gifford, who went ahead and tracked down Asher, and he told us that he was not in charge of calling timeouts. It had to only come from the sideline. So he's throwing Brent Stockstill under the bus. I appreciate that. A little truth-finding mission. Now I don't quite hate Asher O'Hara as much. But you got 14 seconds after this 30-second bonus here to discuss your last play in FCS land.
Yeah, last one is UC Davis and Mercer. They play in the FCS Classic in Alabama. There's major losses for UC Davis. As all-time program leader, Miles Hastings is gone at quarterback. He passed for 4,500 yards last season, which led FCS. And do-it-all running back Lan Larison, who rushed for 1,500 yards, pass received for 845 yards, and had 25 total touchdowns, is gone. 4 of the 6 top receivers are gone. Now, Mercer allowed 2.4 yards per carry on the ground last season and only 72 rushing yards per game. They had 46 sacks and 25 INTs as a group last year. They won't be that strong defensively, but they will still be comparable. Now, they're turning to J.P. Pickles at quarterback, who transfers in from UTEP. They're going to run a slow tempo pace. They'll be run heavy. They'll be very limited in explosiveness. Look to play under 53.5 there.
I absolutely love it. I mean, really, the only reason that you went over it all was a shout out to Pickles. And I mean, you just have to do it. I can't hold you accountable for that one. All right, I'm going to get into my 2-minute offense. Go ahead and start the clock on myself. If you get to go to FCS for week 0, I get to move up to Power 4. I think that's only fair. I'm going to get into some angles in terms of Farmageddon in a moment. But I'm going to go ahead and say this. I want to buy the points. I want to make it a parlay, Fresno plus 14 and under 50.5, parlaying that together, because I want to be able to get a piece of Matt Entz in his first game at the FBS level. He made 3 title games, won 2 of them at North Dakota State in 5 years. Guy's elite. And when you look at that pipeline, the North Dakota State to FBS football, Craig Bowl leaves North Dakota State, makes Wyoming a perennial bowl team. Chris Kleiman jumps up to K-State. Some people thought that was a move that was a little too aggressive in terms of the coaching carousel, the ladder. He just wins the Big 12 in 2022, 28 wins in the last 3 years. So the blueprint is there to play bully ball, to limit explosives on the other side of things. And does he have the horses this year? I'm not quite sure that he does, but at least in game 1, I think from a game planning perspective, you can build around Alzillian Hamilton in their secondary. He has flexibility to be a lockdown corner. Jazon Jacks and Corey Foreman can generate pressure up front. And KU is starting 3 new offensive linemen up front. The receiving room is all new. Could that translate to some empty possessions, a lower scoring game, muck it up a little bit? I think they are. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pause here. I got 40 seconds left. As I mentioned, I want to dip in to the Power 4 level here and look at a play in the Emerald Isle there in Dublin between Iowa State and K-State in Farmageddon. Under 10.5 in the first quarter. I know no one's super excited to bet an under, let alone a first quarter under as your first official play of the season. But so much of this trends in that direction. I went back and looked at all the box scores back to the 80s for college football being played in Ireland. 6 of the last 8 Irish openers, at least one of the 2 teams went scoreless in the first 15 minutes. Weather can absolutely be a major factor here because these kids who are practicing in the Midwest, there's been a heat wave. They're looking at, high 80s, low 90s. It could be 40 degrees colder in Dublin. I think that's going to be a massive difference. Maybe have them stuck in the mud there in the first quarter. And then defensively, John Heacock's defense allowed just 1.5 points per game in the first quarter of their openers, albeit in a lot of cases against FCS competition. Joe Klanderman on the other side has been equally unflappable, allowing just 7 points across the first 5 quarters since he's been promoted to DC in 2020. That's 1.4 points per first quarter in his openers. All right, and I'm going to close that with this. Rocco backed under 241.5 passing yards. If you're looking for a player prop, Campbell put so much on Bex last year, and I think with good reason, because he looked at the skill positions. He looked at Higgins and Noel, and he said, you can make these guys into 1,000-yard receivers if I give you more opportunities. He did. He added 5 pass attempts per game to what he was doing year over year. They ran way more 3 wide receiver sets than they were used to, and I see them going back to that 2 and 3 tight end set that they built the whole offense and Breece Hall around not all that long ago. If you look at it, Hanson's back. Sama's back. I think there's going to be an opportunity for this to go under 30 pass attempts in a game that could be a little bit of a rock fight early. So I'm going to go ahead under 241.5 passing yards for Rocco Becht. I made it in just under the wire. Didn't have to buzz myself, but that's what we're going to do here. We're going to try to give you as many picks, shoehorn them in as we can, holding ourselves accountable to cut the fat and go ahead and just give you the winners. Now the G5 Moneyline Underdog Parlay, no surprise here. We don't have one here for week 0. There's not many underdogs that look all that enticing, but it will be back with a passion. Hopefully we're coming out of the gates swinging in week 1 with a great one in that 7, 8, 9 to 1 range. But for now, we're going to hold off. We're going to make the right decisions here. These are our picks here in week 0. Any closing thoughts before we get into the credits? Talk a little bit about programming, what you can expect from all of us here at BBOC coming up, and also maybe tout our Chicagoland show.
Yeah, just a really exciting time of the season. 5 months worth of preparation coming to the culmination here. We appreciate all of our listeners for sticking through and enjoying all of the conference previews, the Heisman show that dropped. It's just been a lot of fun content for us, and cannot wait to get everything going weekly and giving people some actionable nuggets that they can take into their weekend. So it's absolutely the best time of the year, and you and I are both thrilled.
Duck, Stucky, Colin, myself, we're all going to be at Joe's on Weed on Saturday for the Week 0 games, starting, doors opening up at 11 a.m. for that Farmageddon game. Come on through, no sign-up required, have some drinks with us, fire in some bets. We're going to be talking college football for 15 straight hours, talking the Week 1 card as well. So if you just want to cut it up with us, we would love to see you. That's going to do it for the Group of 5 Deep Dive under the Big Bets on Campus banner. This is the Week 0 episode now in the books. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to the podcast. The next episode, this is important. I'm going to pick a 5-star review before the Week 1 season fully kicks off. Give that person a shout out and also give them a free $10 future on anything they want to bet on the 2025 season. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Search for BBOC and you'll have full access to all of our preseason content. Like, subscribe, comment. It really helps with the algorithm. Thanks for listening to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. And as always, best of luck with all your bets.